In this seminar, I'm going to cover the process for plan management and workflow. I've created a brand new plan set called the Lake Point. I'm going to review the process that I use for file management, my workflow, setting up my template for both the layout and the plan, and specifically inside of the plan file we're going to talk about defaults, layer sets, annotation sets, and save plan views. In my file management practice, I create a folder for each new residence. You can see in the diagram that I have up here, underneath my documents, I have this Lake Point Residence folder. Inside of there, I'm going to place the plan file and the layout file. Layout file is used for your construction drawings. The plan file is used for actually drawing the different components for your plan, your electrical, your roof, etc. Those two files are linked, and it's good practice to keep them in the same folder. If you end up moving them later, you might break that link and then have to relink it. Underneath of this Lake Point Residence folder, I also create other miscellaneous folders for materials, renderings, photos, miscellaneous, and then PDF files. I use the PDF files in my layout process to actually control my revision management. Since the plan file and layout file are linked, I don't rename those files. I simply print my layout file with a name that is conducive to a revision file name. In this file structure diagram, in the plan file represented in the yellow block is where you do your design and your working file work. You control these through layers and layer sets. Connected to the plan file are CAD details. These may be specific things about your plan. Think of this as a workspace, something like your window schedule or your door schedule, or specific details that are plan specific. All of these views are sent out to your layout file and are scaled, and that's really what creates the view that you want for your construction drawings. In my workflow process, I've created a second plan file for CAD details that are generic and typically reused for most plans that I have. Roof detail, foundation detail, deck detail. These are usually common details that for each plan that I do, I use these details. And this allows me to open this up, modify it, and reuse it time after time. I scale those views and will send it out to the layout file. As I get into the process, you'll be able to understand this a little better. With CAD details, in some cases these are details that may be common across different plans that you create. And one option you may have to do that is to create a separate plan file with just CAD details that makes it easy to manage those in a workspace as you begin to do your plans and bring details forward into them. A look at the file structure and process that I use. Again, the plan file is where I draw my floor plans. The layout file is where I send my structured scale drawings. There are CAD details that are plan specific, so if I have a specific section view through a house, I will put that in a CAD detail, or my window schedule or my cabinet schedule go in those CAD details. Then this third file is a plan file that are CAD details that are generic and reused across many client plans in the future. Let's take a look at the CAD detail plan file that I have and have used for this project. In this plan file, I've created only details that I use across many plans. In this file that I call Details LP for Lake Point, I have different CAD details that are consistent across different plans, maybe modified slightly. And as you look at the different tabs, I've opened up some of this information. Here's a stair detail that I've created. Here's a shear wall schedule, my roof details, my floor sections, an electrical legend that I typically use, window flashing, and there are other components. These are files that are typically the same across many clients, and what I do is I will save this along with the plan and layout file in the same folder and then make minor modifications to this as I go forward. It's a way to keep my workspace for my CAD details easy to manage, and I find it to be a faster process. I then send this out to the layout file, and that's what you're looking at with the images on the screen here. So each one of these details either comes from the plan specific file in the Lake Point file or the details file, and that information, if it's generic, comes from that details file. Here's a combination where I pulled the window schedule from the plan specific file, and then notice my flashing detail right in the center comes from my generic one. The flashing detail is typically the same across different plans. I use this process to manage my workflow. Again, the plan file to draw my walls, place my windows, do my framing, CAD details that are plan specific go within inside this workspace underneath the plan file, and then my CAD details that are generic and reused are in a separate file for easy management, and then I send all of those to this layout file that maintains the working drawings that I want for my permit set. A little bit more about the project structure. The plan file is where you do your design and your working file. Typical things that you have in here are your floor plan, your electrical plan, your framing plan. Then you have saved views. These can be saved plan views that allow you to open up multiple views, multiple 2D views of your plan. You have interior and exterior camera views that you can save. And then there are elevations and section views you save, and render views you save. CAD details are a workspace inside of the plan file, typically used for schedules, detailed drawings, molding build-ups, wall assemblies. These are usually things that are very plan specific and not necessarily generic that would be shared by all of your construction drawings across multiple clients. The layout file is used for construction drawings. As you complete in your plan file these different drawings, you send these out to your layout file at a scaled view, and typically your floor plan views, the save views that we talked about, CAD details such as your schedules, and then any notes you may have. Again, the plan file and the layout file are linked, so any changes that you make in the plan file are then represented in your layout file. In the typical workflow for creating a new plan and drawing set in Chief Architect, let's go through the workflow process. To begin with, your plan file, which is your drawing area, you would begin by creating really your first floor plan. And you might create your rooms, your doors, your windows, and dimension it. Once you're finished with that room, maybe that's all you're going to do, you might send that out to your layout file and scale it. You then create additional views. So for example, you may create a framing view or a kitchen and bath view. Change the layer set so that it turns on the different layers that you want for your cabinets or whatever. And then you would also send that out to your layout file. And the typical drawing order might be to begin with your floor plan, put in your site plan, do your kitchen and bath interiors, etc. as you can see down the list. Once you've completed your main floor, if you have additional floors, a foundation or a second floor, you would typically then create those additional floors and again send out those views as you need to your layout file. This is the workflow that I use. As long as you find something that works for you, that's great. But again, typically you're going to want to begin with your main floor and work up or work down from that point forward. Next, let's talk about setting up your templates. And to begin with, I'm going to start with a layout template. As I open up the completed plan set, I have 26 pages in this plan set you can see off to the side in my project browser that range from the floor plan, site disturbance plan, elevations, floor plan, and several other different pages that you can see down here in my page list. Typically what I'll do is I'll have a template plan that has each one of these pages already created without the plan specific information. And as I go through my plan creation process, I'm actually just plugging in the different views that I need for each one of the pages. I'll leave the existing text in here if it's applicable across different plans, and then I'm not recreating it. So it saves me time as I go through and create my different plan sets. This can save me a significant amount of time because I'll leave text like this fireplace wall elevation. Maybe it's slightly different in a new project I use, but I already have the callout information and the text in there. I also have the page information on each one of the pages. If it's a page that I'm not going to use, then I can easily delete it. Let's take a look at a couple of the different template files that I use when I create my layout file. I'll tell you how to create a template file, but let's begin by looking at the template file that I use that is half the pages that I typically might use for an abbreviated plan set. You'll notice in this plan set that I have 12 different pages typically already saved. There's no client information inside of here, but it has the text that I usually use on each of the pages. Now note, on page 0 is considered the master page, so anything on this page will actually show on all of your pages. I go ahead and leave the address information in here, plan name in there. It has the font that I typically like to use, and then it's easy to come in here and change it. It has my logo, my copyright statement, and then this area, this blank area here, is typically for the page information. As you go through the different pages, on page 0, anything that is on there will show up on all of those subsequent pages. As you kind of look through the different pages that I have, here's the floor plan page. Again, notice that I leave text on my template plan that is common to all of the plans that I use, and then if I need to make it specific, I will add additional text. But all of this information is available as you come through here. Again, notice that I leave text in here, I adjust the scale information in here, and clearly I would have to adjust that as I need to, but as a baseline it already has the information that I need for the typical plan set that I create. Here's my kitchen and bath page, and you can see that I have a lot of the callouts already in place for my elevation views. This is a 24 by 36, so I can actually get most of the information that I need for an entire kitchen on this sheet. Now I've opened up the larger template plan. You can see here are all 26 pages that I might typically use, which would include the shear wall and framing information. And if I wanted to use this full set, you can see in some cases I'll even leave some of the details in here that are typically used in this set, and then it's easy for me to use that information in creating my plan set. The question is how do you create one of these template files? If we take a look at the first approach, when you begin Chief Architect and you're looking at the Startup Options dialog, there's a setting here for a new layout. Let's begin with the out-of-the-box experience. In this case, it opens up a very different looking layout, and you can tell where your layouts are stored in your File Preferences option. Underneath my Edit menu, if we take a look at our preferences, underneath the General panel, New Plans, you'll find both a plan template and a layout template. In this case, it's going to typically go to your documents, depending on the version of your program, and templates. And if you browse into that folder, you'll see a few different options, and then there is another folder within that that will show you both imperial and metric layouts. These are the out-of-the-box options you can choose from, and this is one method you can discover and reset them. I'm going to show you a little bit easier approach. Now, as I mentioned, on page 0, anything on this page will display on all pages. To begin with, if you change your borders and your image for your logo or your company name, that would go on page 0. Once you're finished with those changes in a layout file, in the File menu under Templates, you can do a File Save As Template. When you do this, it's going to ask you where you want to save that. You can save that in the default program data in Templates. Let's go ahead and give this a name. When you choose to save, it's going to ask you if you want to reset that and use that as your default template for all future new templates when you begin a new file. In the preferences, you'll see that that has been changed and reset to that. A similar approach to creating your layout template is when you complete your first construction drawing or you open a construction drawing that you like, go in and delete all of the specific client information. I'm just going to hold my Shift key down and delete these components. Press the Delete key, and you can assume that I do that on all of the other pages on there. And then on page 0, I'll go in and make it very generic. On page 0, I'll come in here and I will change the plan name and the address maybe to be generic. When I'm finished, I'll do the same thing as we did a little bit earlier under your File menu, come down to Templates, and then hit Save As Template. Again, give it a good descriptive name. And when you click Save, it's going to ask you if you want to use this for all future new templates. This is an easy way to reset where your preference is for your templates. Let's go ahead and save that, and we'll go back into the preferences and take a look. Under our preferences for the layout template, notice that it's now using the layout template name that we just gave it, and it will reset it for us. You can manually choose a different one by coming back in here and using the Browse button and going out to that folder. Just to reiterate, what is important when you create a template file for your layout is you make sure that none of the actual pages have any specific client information in it. No elevation views, no floor plan views, no section views. And when you have your template, typically use the most pages you create, and then you can go in and customize it for the next project you're working on. It makes it a quick way to plug and play the different views you want, has the text you already want in there, and it's a quick way to help you achieve your plan file setup. Layout templates can be very beneficial to helping you create your plan set quickly. The next component is creating a template for your plans, similar to a layout, but there are different components you want to set up. I'm going to go through and talk about defaults for floor platforms, other components, layer sets, annotation sets, and a new feature beginning in X10 called Saved Plan Views. Let's take a quick look at the profile plan that I've created for the Lake Point plan. If I go into a new plan, this new plan is using the template properties from the Lake Point profile that I built. And note that profile and template are often used interchangeably. Some of the things that I do in addition to defaults, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, is one, underneath of my wall types, I will go in and usually maintain a bunch of different wall types inside of my plans. And I have quite a few in here, but these are wall types. You can export them and import them. I bring them into my template plan, I carry them around, and then I can set up the default interior and exterior wall types that I use when I begin drawing. The next thing that I like to do is I like to have my CAD details maintain my schedules. Underneath CAD details, which you can think of as a workspace, I actually pre-build all of the schedules. So notice that I have my cabinet, door, and window schedule in here. When you open these up, really there's nothing associated with them other than they're set up and pre-configured. And what that means, if I were to open up this schedule itself, I already have all the columns and information that I typically want in my schedules, the formatting, the font, and everything that I would want in those schedules. So I'm not rebuilding that every time I do a new plan. You can see in my Windows schedule when then I start populating it, the schedule then has the thumbnail and information that I want to be able to easily generate my Windows schedule. Another important thing that I always have in my template plan are my layer sets. In this case, all my different layer sets. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then also the different annotation sets, which control the defaults for text and dimensions and callouts and a few other things. And this is usually the way that I like to have my template and profile plan set up, and then I'll make customizations to this as I go through a new client plan. Let's take a little bit further look into the process. Let's talk about the default process in creating a template plan file. I've opened up the plan that I've actually completed, and I'll tell you the process that I do in creating a template plan. And it's usually an evolutionary process because as I get more mature in my plan process, or I've got more experience in my plan process, I'm probably going to change some of the defaults in my template plan over time. And I'm also going to probably have a few different template plans, maybe one for remodeling, one's for kitchen and bath, and maybe one's for whole house, depending on the level of sophistication or diversity that I have in the plan process. Let's begin by looking at our plan defaults. You'll find the default settings under your Edit menu. There's also a wrench. Notice a little wrench icon here. There's also a wrench that you can access as the default settings in this menu bar here. There are a lot of defaults in Chief Architect, and when you begin the process, I wouldn't be too concerned that you don't know all of the right defaults. As you begin to get more experience, you can change these defaults in your profile plan and evolve it. One of the things I always tell people is if you begin a new plan and you find yourself always changing something, that's a good thing to change as a default so that you save yourself time in the plan process. Think about if you use something like Microsoft Word and you have a specific font in mind, you could set that up in that default, and then as you begin a new document, it always has the same default setting. As you look down through the different defaults in Chief Architect, one of the important areas is in your floor and room height information. If you're doing new construction and you care about the platform information, you can come in here and set this information. In this case, my rough ceiling is 109 1/8. 109 1/8 allows you to buy a common stud. Notice the finished ceiling. If you're an interior designer and you want to set that at 108, you don't care about the structure, this is a good setting that you could come in here and type a value that works for you. The other thing is if you're doing construction and you care about the platform thicknesses when you do your elevation views, down here underneath the floor structure is where you can set that information for that cavity. This can be important for new projects. In this case, I'm actually using a floor truss system with a subfloor that's 1 1/8 thick, and then the floor truss itself is 22 inches. And as I begin to do new floors, I will make sure that each floor has that same setting. Usually this is plan specific, but if you find yourself always doing something, maybe you're always building with a 2x12 joist, then you could come in and set that as your profile plan, and all future plans would then use that setting. Some defaults for cabinets, doors, and windows can be set through the dialog itself. Another handy way to change those is simply to click on an object that you like, and in your lower edit menu typically you're going to find a set as default. When you choose that, you can quickly set the defaults. In this case, the particular cabinet style and hardware has been set as my default. You can do the same thing for other objects such as doors and windows. A quick way to set defaults up for your components. Now let's say you've got a plan that you like and you want to export some of those defaults in your profile plan because you always use a particular window style or door style. Now, the way you can do that is to open up your profile plan, and then you can import defaults through your import menu and import default settings. And I'm going to talk about building your own custom plan default and template file here in just a second. This is a way, if you like particular things from an existing plan, cabinets, doors, windows, other things, you can import those things. And as long as we're in here, I'm going to be talking about layer sets and annotation sets. Again, if you have a plan that you've created annotation sets, which are a collection of defaults, or layer sets, you can export these components through the export menu, and you'll find export annotation sets as well as export layer sets, so you can easily reuse things that you've already created and then import that in to your template plan. When you start a new plan in Chief Architect, much like the layout file, it's going to use the template settings found in your preferences. Let's go ahead and explore what the preference settings are for that template plan. Next to the layout template, just above it, is where you'll find the template plan that you're using. And if you browse into the template folder, there's a few different template options, and depending on the version of your program, you may have slightly different ones that I have on my screen. And as you begin a new template or a new file, it will use the properties from these, and as you draw your walls, place your windows, it will be using those default settings found in this template. Let's open up our default template from the residential, and let's make some changes in there, and then we'll save it as a custom template file. I've opened up the residential plan template, and I'm beginning a brand new plan. Notice that it says it's untitled. I'm in a working plan view, and the different components up here are set. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a simple house with 4 walls, put in a roof, a couple of windows, and I'll speed through this real quickly, and then let's talk about the default settings. This new simple plan that we created was using the residential template, and the doors, the windows, the roof, the foundation type are all derived out of that template file. These are all things that you can pre-configure and change in your own template file depending on how you do your construction or design techniques in your locale. Let's make a couple of changes in here, and then we'll save this as our template plan. Let's begin with the doors and windows. Let's say that your window style, in this case it's probably a double hung. Let's change this window style and make some modifications to it. When I double click and open on it, notice that it says use default. That's because it came out of the template. Let's go ahead and change this to a single casement window. And you can change other things for the size, the sill, the sash, the color, and the materials. Let's just change it to a single casement window, and I'm going to use the set as default option down here. Now when I change future windows, it will have that single casement window. When I place a new window, it will be the same properties. Let's do the same thing to the door. Let's double click and open up on the door. Again, it says use default. Let's change it to a glass door, and let's also put some lights in here. I'm going to make the lights craftsman style, and maybe we'll put a few across and a few then vertical. You can see the change. And then again, we'll set that as our default door style. And then as long as we're on the outside of the house, let's take a look at our build roof options. If you build roofs or build ceilings based on roofs as an interior designer, you may want to come in and change. First of all, I have the automatic rebuild on. Let's go ahead and change the default pitch. So again, if you're building a shallow pitch or a steep pitch, I'll just change this to be 6. Then every time you begin a new plan, it will begin with the pitch and information you put in here. And one more change, as long as we're on the outside of the house, let's look at the foundation style. Depending on the type of foundation, if you're building those, you can choose. In this case, I have a crawl space, walls with footings, crawl space. There are other options in here. Let's say that you typically build on slab. Let's go ahead and make that change. Again, since the automatic was on, it updated the foundation. And then let's go inside and make a change to the cabinet. And I'm just going to make a fairly simple change. I'm going to come in and change the material type for the countertop. Once I find the material, I'll go ahead and apply that onto the cabinet. Select the cabinet, set it as our default. Again, as you place future items of that, it will have that same property that you changed. Again, the door style, the hardware, all of those things you can change as your default. Same with the room height and the flooring materials. You can change all of those defaults, and then when you're finished, you can save this as a template plan. It's very important when you save a template plan that there are no architectural elements inside of the plan. In this case, you wouldn't want walls or the cabinets, anything in there, because as it begins a new plan, it's going to open that up. Let's go through and delete the components, and then we'll save this as a template plan. Now, I don't have a lot of information here, so I'm just going to go into the plan view. I'm going to draw a marquee by holding my shift key down and dragging my mouse around everything. I'm going to press delete. And when I do this, I have the automatic rebuild roof turned on. It's going to turn that off, and depending on if you want to have your automatic rebuild of foundations and roofs on, you'll need to go back in and change that setting. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything and turn off the automatic rebuild roof. And then in the foundation area, it's automatic, so it was removed. If you want to change those settings, sometimes I don't like to have my automatic foundation on, so I'm just going to simply turn that off. And the roof is also turned off. And now in this plan, there is nothing saved in here. When I want to save this as a template, underneath the File menu, you can come to Templates and you can say Save as Template. When you open this up, give it a good name. In this case, I'm just going to give it the My Template name. Save it, and the program will ask you if you want to use this new file as your default template. And if you do that, it's going to change your preferences. Let's go ahead and make that change. And when we come back in and we do a new plan, and then real quickly I'll draw 4 more walls. And you can see that it has those components that we have. We have the slab foundation, we have a 6 and 12 pitch roof, and our cabinet has the material that we changed. And again, any of the components you find yourself saying, I always do something, the baseboard height, the flooring materials, ceiling height, those are things you can open up in your template plan and you can make adjustments. Under my preferences, notice that my template file has been updated to use my template. It's in this folder, and if I wanted to make changes to that, I could browse to that folder, open that file up, make changes to it, resave it, and then all future plans that I begin with will have those changes. Default settings like cabinets, flooring materials, windows, doors. If you find yourself always changing something when you begin a new plan, make sure you open it up and change your template plan to have those components in there. Other things like dimension defaults and annotation sets, which is a collection of defaults, you can refine that over time and export that from your favorite plan that you've made a change in and import it. Let's take a look at some of the settings that I have in this plan file that I've created for the Lake Point sample. Let me just talk briefly about layer sets and annotation sets. Layer sets allow you to turn on different layers quickly and efficiently, and then you save that, and then you can send those views out to your layout file. In my different layer sets, in this case I've got a clean view called the shell, might be used as a brochure. Here's a layer set that then would turn on the section views and the different camera views in the plan. And these are different layer sets. You can export those, save those into your template template plan. And again, as you get more experience using Chief Architect and you build different layer sets, you can easily export those out. The same works in a 3D view. A lot of times I'll create a few different 3D views of my plan, and then I'll want to isolate a particular view. Here's an overview without the terrain, and I create a layer set for these things. And so here's a view with the terrain. Kind of puts in context why that foundation is so large. And then out of the box there's a 3D framing set for the different layers. And a lot of times what I'll like to do is isolate maybe one of these framing components by making a copy of this layer set. And what I've done is I've created one for just the roof. And this is a common layer set that I like to use. And all of these layer sets that you see, whether it's for 2D or 3D, can then be exported. Much like the default settings for windows and doors and cabinets, roofs and foundations, there are default settings for your text and your dimensions. Whether you're creating a wall elevation for a kitchen or a section view that I just had up on the screen, those default settings are controlled through your active defaults. There's a little check mark by the toolbar here, and it will show which active defaults are currently set up. So the dimensions are being controlled by a dimension default, my text, some of my callouts, my markers, and the arrow style that's used. These are all of the active defaults, and those are actually included in an annotation set, so this annotation set would actually change all of those settings. As you watch additional videos and you learn about dimension defaults or annotation sets, these two can be very beneficial to put in all of your profile plans so you can bring them forward and you're not recreating those. When I do a wall elevation, I actually like to use existing dimension defaults because it's very different than doing a section elevation that is typically in feet and goes to different components. So those are defaults that can make your plan development very fast. Again, I'm not going to really touch on that in this video, but watch the annotation set video available in our video system, and also dimension defaults if you want to learn more about that. Again, layer sets and annotation sets you can export and import into your profile plan. So in this case, if I come down to the export menu, again, you'll find the ability to export both layer sets and your annotation sets. So as you begin to build those over your plan experience, then you can import those through the import menu into your profile plan. The final subject I want to talk about are saved plan views and how to use those for your plan development. If you're an existing Chief Architect customer, you know that your cameras can be saved, and you can explore these through the Project Browser. Project Browser is now available in interiors, but you can come in and you can open up any of these saved camera views, and you can open it up and preview an exact saved view. This also works for your elevation cameras, which you can find in this case in your Project Browser under cross sections, and I can also open up my wall elevations as I did for that kitchen wall elevation. All of those views are saved views that you can easily access, send out to your layout sheet. What we've done is we've allowed you to get the same type of view in your 2D view. Let me consolidate my Project Browser here and let's talk about it a little bit. In the Saved Plan Views, if I were to go back to the floor plan shell for our brochure, the Saved Plan Views allow you to open up the same plan in multiple views. Let's go ahead and open up our kitchen and bath set as well as our shear wall. Notice along the top of my program I have 3 tabs open. The shear walls that I just clicked on, kitchen and bath, the shell that has nothing as far as dimensions or callouts. So all of these views of this same file can be opened through the saved plan views. You can also edit these. If you come in here and you open this object up, in this case I have a 3-story house, I can actually save the floor, I can save the zoom, and other information as far as the annotation set, information about the active defaults, and so it makes it very easy to quickly open up the plan and manage my plan process, because I may be doing both framing and electrical at the same time, so I know that my can lights maybe are fitting in between the ceiling joists, but I don't want to have to turn the different layers on for those views. So I can have both views open, especially if I have multiple monitors. Saved plan views are a quick way to have multiple views open at the same time for editing of my plan. Saved plan views you can export, so if you want to make those different views, you would need to open up your profile plan, create the saved plan view information, and then you have access to it as you begin new plans. As you get more experience using Chief Architect, file management workflow becomes much easier, and your template setup is really an important component for your productivity. And begin slowly and adjust those things as you begin to get more experience with different client projects. Again, if you find yourself saying you always do something with a new plan, open up that template file, make the adjustments, save it, and then future files will have that information available to you. I hope the video helps. There are other videos in particular on annotation sets and default settings, and I would encourage you to take a look at those in our video system.